Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for another indie comic review, and this time I've got two indie comics about to be reviewed this time. Of course we have NewThink, issue number 3, and of course the last ShadowHawk one-shot. And I'll get things organised and prepared of which one I'll be covering first. So starting off with first things first, and that is the cover for this particular story, or this particular comic. Now, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that's happening inside with the story? Not really, but overall I give it a 6 out of 10. I'll now go to showing some of the internal art, as well as seeing some of the things around the story, as we look around the beginning, middle, and of course the end. As we move into the beginning of this story, we get a bit of a narration from a character who actually believes that vampires exist. But of course, whilst this is happening, they're sort of like discussing some of the things of the world around them in their present day life. And of course, we get to see some people who are a little bit overweight to being quite, or of course to where they would like to be in their weight and how they would like to look. And I think that's really good. As we start to jump towards the middle of the story, we deal with some of the ills of daily life, of like some things that can happen here, and it looks like this is sort of like addressing bullying of sorts, but also how sometimes mankind can be evil with the technology that they use. And that's a very good question that gets brought up. And last but not least, moving to somewhat the corporatization of certain things, and to practically where the story starts to reach its end. So for the internal art, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to jump into the area of the story. Now, first things first, I really think these stories would be really good for the trade as they're coming across, because they all are technically one-off stories. Like, first issue had its own, second issue had its own completely different story, and this one once again is another story. And it's really interesting how each story is slightly different, addresses even different issues, but not just different issues, but also some of the things that happen with each of these characters' worlds of what we see. So first things first, did we get to see anything in relation to the story that did we get any comic book references? No, we didn't. Did we get anything in relation to time? Not really. Did we get any indication of location? No, we didn't. And do we even know who the cast of characters are? No, we didn't. I think we got more of a better understanding of the cast of characters in the last issue compared to this issue. But overall, I do give this story a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move into the last ShadowHawk one-shot. So now it's time to begin the last ShadowHawk one-shot review. And first things first, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that's happening inside with the story? Sure enough it does, to which I give it a 7.5 out of 10. I'll now show you some of the internal art, as well as some of the things that are happening story-wise, before I move on to the art rating, and then finally the story. So I'll show this in regards to context as to what's being brought across to us, to reader, and also some of the characters that are connected to this story. And as things begin, we get to see a bit of a start, also a bit of a connection as to who this character might be. One thing that we do know with the story, that it does somewhat connect to ancient Egypt. but it also connects to the god known as Horus, who is also connected to Egyptian mythology. As we advance through the story, as we start to reach the midway point, this almost looks to be one of the villains that this character has actually gone up against. And he is the main character of the ShadowHawk. And it looks like he could actually be returning back to the city, but also going up against this villain with maybe this somewhat supernatural villain that he has to deal with too, or cosmic type villain. Now, this is one of the pages towards the end, and we somewhat see a connection towards the ShadowHawk character. And we also learn that his character is one of those characters meant to be protecting the innocent and not see harm done to him. And last but not least, we move towards the end, to which we somewhat see the ShadowHawk character either somewhat defeated, it looks to be defeated, never to be returned. And one thing that really gets sort of pushed a lot in this story is flesh death. In other words, the death of the body. But there's no indication of, sort of like death of the soul or things like that. So for the internal art, I gave a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move in relation to the story rating. Did we get any indication of time as to when this takes place? No, we didn't. Location? Not really. Even though we had sort of like a connected reference at the beginning, sort of like mainly connecting to Egypt and some of the Egyptian deities. That's about all. In regards to the cast of characters, about the key cast of characters that were only referenced were at that beginning of the story, which I showed you at the beginning for context. We had Heru, of course the Nomo, and last but not least, sort of like the ShadowHawk characters. Overall, I gave this story a rating of 7 out of 10. Until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.